regarded as one of the most quote-unquote progressive pieces of legislation that have been done across the country, specifically in regards to the social equity licensing piece and the worker cooperative aspect. However, as we know, we can pass legislation, but it's all about implementation. And that's why we're here. Because since December, there has been a release of certain licenses for those who are already doing medicinal. But now, as we lead on towards specifically just looking at recreational licenses that are going to be dispersed, that's going to be something that's monitored and regulated by the Cannabis Advisory Board. What we did in legislation is we set out the pathways and essentially the framework as to what that should look like. But in looking at that legislation, which was 187 pages, we have quickly noticed between advocates and legislators that there are a ton of growth areas in there. There are growth areas in related to taxation that social equity applicants would have to experience, some of the economic hardships that are not accounted for, and ultimately, I would argue that while it's good on paper, I'm concerned that in implementation, we're going to see a similar trend, similar to what we have seen in other states, such as Colorado most notably, where you have out-of-state capitalists with large amounts of concentrated wealth that are able to come in here, invade the space, and at that point, really just take over the local market. And especially with our neighbors in Massachusetts also having legalized recreational cannabis, I can see it being a regional form of monopolies. But that's why we're here, to ensure that we are looking specifically at the policies that are being discussed by the Commission, while also reflecting on the legislation we pass, and ensuring that we don't run into a situation where there are cannabis monopolies that are essentially taking over our state. But instead that we are staying true to what it means to be a social equity applicant. What it means to ensure that people who have been impacted directly by the war on drugs actually have an opportunity to have their feet in the industry. At the same time, looking at worker cooperative models. Because I wasn't there for the purpose of feel-good legislation. I was there to ensure that once that bill passed, once it was actually implemented, once we had commission members appointed, which they have now been appointed for the last 3 months, that we would get together as advocates and ensure that the implementation was about equity. And most of all, accessibility. Because that's another main issue that we need to talk about as well, is how accessible is the cannabis market to working people, to those from lower incomes. And again, I would make the argument that right now, it's a pay-to-play system. You need to invest well over $15,000 just to get your name into the quote-unquote lottery. A lot of us don't have the startup funds just to risk being a part of a lottery. Much less actually being selected as a part of the lottery and then having all the other startup costs that are associated with it. So by having these discussions, I can tell you right now it's going to have an impact going into the months of December, January, the start of legislative session. As a reminder, we're in the State House from January through June. A lot happens in between those 6 months. And I would expect that a lot of the work that comes out of these policy salons is going to be seen over those 6 months. We're actually going to be able to pass legislation based on feedback that we're hearing from people in the community, people who have already been invested in the industry and have a stake in it. And then from there, we'll ensure that the Commission is actually enforcing the rules and regulations as they're supposed to, and that they're not playing a rubber stamp for any corporation that's trying to come in and buy out the industry. And most importantly, that we guarantee accessibility for everyone. So with that being said, again, I want to thank you all, especially those who have been coming out, policy salon after policy salon. If you have not already, please volunteer to be a part of the policy reading group. I understand that they meet every Monday. They're looking at different sections of the bill. And again, our priority is to ensure that social equity applicants are actually being regarded as social equity applicants. And at the same time, that the worker cooperatives are actually going to be a sustainable model and actually supported through public resources and public funding. So I'm looking forward to the discussions tonight, y'all. Thank you.
Awesome.